Welcome to Branscombe Chine. It's episode 7 and we are a little bit away from Off the Lip headquarters. Today I'm down in Bournemouth at the Para Roadshow brought to you by Surfing England, and I have a guest with me who is the very first world champion on our deck chairs. She is a fearless competitor in the water and she has taken adversity head on and has risen to the very top. Welcome to Off the Lip, Zoe Smith.
Thank you.
Oh, it's so nice to have you down here on your home turf, and what a beautiful day you've organised us here. And
It's gorgeous.
we're down here for the roadshow, and you can see that there's been some people down here today getting their first taste of surfing. When was your first taste of surfing?
Well, kind of like as a kid, used to bodyboard a lot. There's quite a big bodyboarding scene down here. And I never really felt like I had the time to surf, if you know what I mean. It takes a lot of dedication, doesn't it? So I did sort of bits and pieces, but it was really, for me, after I lost my leg, all of the sports that I used to do and enjoy, I found like a real source of frustration. And in any para sport, you're trapped often into a certain type of sport due to classification. And the beauty of para surfing, if you like, is that it's broad. You can have anything from a tetraplegic to, below knee amputee like myself. And so I inquired about it just before, I think it was lockdown. And then obviously that happened.
Yeah.
So it was just after that. And I started off at the wave, and initially I didn't have like a prosthesis or anything that worked, so it was an absolute nightmare.
So did you actually have any limb attached? You went with a limb, but it wasn't really a limb that was going to help you surf?
Yeah, so I had my walking leg.
Yeah.
But essentially, if you can imagine a leg that is designed to walk doesn't have any amazing like energy. It's hard to explain, but when you put in energy, a prosthetic will give it back if it's on a solid surface. It also has a foot shell on it, which is designed to be put into a shoe. So it's got a open hole within the plastic foot shell, which obviously when you're surfing is just totally filled with water. So then you've got this little limb trying to pick up a really, really heavy, almost anchor on the bottom of your knee. So it took me like quite a long time to just figure out the mechanics of surfing with a prosthetic.
Yeah.
And then of course you get into the biomechanics, which are different with one limb. But
Yeah, of course.
yes, this is kind of my 5th year now.
5th year and already a world champion. That is a very rapid rise to the top, and that's, I think, is testament to your dedication, to your ability to overcome adversity, because you had a traumatic injury. I often feel uncomfortable about asking our para athletes about it, but you feel comfortable about talking about it. So what unfortunately happened to you at the time?
So I was actually on a run. I was training for the Great North Run, and I'd just been accepted onto a postgraduate in education to be a PE teacher in this sort of like high-end sports academy. So I was kind of like top of my game in terms of fitness and athleticism at that point. It's always been like a big passion of mine. And so I was on the way, it was Friday night, I was on the way out to go out with my mates, and my friend just happened to drive past me, and she was like, "Oh, get in. Well, you're nearly home anyway." And it's one of those cliches, I was about 100 metres from home.
Yeah.
And we were driving down the road as National Speed Limit Road, and there is a turning in the road where the other drivers should wait at a bollard. And he, instead of waiting, he just went at around about 100 miles an hour, turned across our path. And unfortunately, I'd had my foot resting on the dashboard. I was taking my running shoes off, and the airbag detonated, and my leg just
Got the force.
It imploded pretty much. Yeah.
So they were unable to save your leg after multiple operations, I believe.
Yeah, I had a huge amount of surgery above and below the knee. Above the knee, the damage is sort of irreparable but manageable.
Yeah.
In terms of, where they chose to amputate, it was worthwhile, 100% to try and salvage the limb above the knee. But below the knee, no. So my leg was amputated sort of 3 fingers below the knee. So it's a really, really high amputation for a below knee, which gives you less mobility, less flexibility, and significantly less balance. The longer the residual limb, the better.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of disadvantaged in terms of like the average below knee amputee, if you like, especially in a balance sport. It's ludicrous that I chose this
Yeah.
as my activity of choice.
You're starting almost behind in a kind of in a system that they're ahead of you because they got more control with more of their limb being able to control their board.
Yeah, I mean, with any spectrum of classification, you'll get people at the top and people at the bottom of that, range of where you sit.
And where do you fall?
Against other amputees of longer limbs, for sure, I would be more disabled because I have over a foot of leg missing.
Yeah. So you've gone from bodyboarding. So you've bodyboarding gives you that wave knowledge and understanding of reading the ocean, how to kind of like navigate down the line. So you obviously came from that, but you'd never really surfed at that point, had you? So who was the person that you were inspired by or saw, perhaps from a para background, that made you think, I want to try that?
I didn't know that para surfing existed for standing athletes at that point. The kind of media that I'd seen had predominantly been wheelchair people. And then I don't remember the exact thing, but I was researching and I found Melissa Reed and Peg. And I was like, okay. So that there's standing and I would assume Peg would be a similar, in terms of his classification to me. So I reached out to both of them, and actually at the time, the manager of Surfing England Para team was Andy Joyce, who lived here.
Yeah, I remember.
And so Joycey took me out at the pier a few times, and it was just like a complete calamity. I couldn't get my leg through because my prosthetic is my front leg.
Yeah.
So I couldn't, just popping up was just unbelievably difficult. And then balancing on a prosthesis in the water was just next level challenging. But really that's kind of why I loved it.
Because it's a challenge and you want to overcome it.
Yeah.
So in your biomechanics of popping up, do you pop up rear foot now and slide front foot forward? Or are you still taking most of the weight on the front foot as you pop up?
No, I'm like a back foot, front foot pop up.
Yeah,
for sure.
And there's a real range of pop-ups across the whole of... I remember watching this amazing video at Kelly Slater's wave pool where they got all the pros and looked at them, and some do back foot lead and then put their foot front, and some put their front.
Does.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so you were having to adapt in the way in which you were popping up because of your prosthesis, but also learning a sport where everyone else is using two legs. It's phenomenal that you develop so quickly. So you've picked it up just down the beach here at the pier. So we're at Branscombe, and then to our left is Bournemouth's main pier, which is a fantastic wave on the either side of it. And from there you went to the wave. You've talked about obviously surfing here in the ocean, and you've talked about surfing at the wave. Where do you feel your progression happens most rapidly?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because they're two different beasts, really. Yeah. If you only surf at the wave pool, you'll never learn the essentials of surfing in the sea. And sometimes I think you limit yourself if you only surf in the sea. And there are people that refuse to surf in wave pools. Because of the complexity of surfing in the ocean, you just might not get the chance to sort of finely tune maneuvers. So I have always taken like a really balanced approach over the winter when we get pretty consistent swell. I mean, it's the south coast. It's not the firing north coast of Cornwall, but it's there. We can get a really high wave count on a given day. Can surf 20, 30 waves down here. And then in the summer, sort of spring and summer, where we kind of, around the spring equinox, our surf kind of flattens and it becomes like a bathing beach, I'll then train heavily at the wave. And what I'll then find when I come into, the tail end of that season is that it takes me a little bit of time to get back into that ocean fitness, but my turns are like next level.
Technique's on point, but that kind of core strength of the paddling back out and the maybe battling through those waves and duck diving, because there is that part of being in the wave, especially if you can get into that conveyor belt of the rip, it just pulls you back out to where you need to be, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they've slightly changed it, so I'd say it does require a bit more cardio than it used to, which is good.
They're doing shorter, sort of sending maybe 8 waves, aren't they? Then they kind
of 10 and 10.
That's right, yeah.
So it's like 20 wave sets, and if you are in a smaller session of 10, you can literally surf 2 waves every set for where you would have had 1.
Yeah.
So I found it quite good from that perspective as well.
Yeah, so it keeps your paddle fitness as well as your technique.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the people that doubt going to a wave pool, they have to experience it at least once, because you can have that mindset that it's not natural and it's not like being in the sea, and there's a lot of those traditionalists, but actually as soon as you take off and you forget that you're in this artificial place, it feels exactly the same, and it is so much fun. And that's the thing, I've never met anyone that's come out and said it wasn't fun.
No, and for me, like one of the main componentries that I found really difficult when I was learning who I was as a surfer, as an amputee, was that there's no research at all on what boards work best when you have not got a front leg. And one of the things that I've realised is I can't surf with my back foot on the tail pad. Otherwise, if you can imagine a surfboard where the user is 75% dominant on their back foot in a natural standing position on concrete, you then almost translate that into sort of a 5%, because a prosthetic leg doesn't weigh anything. And then the limb inside it is smaller and weighs significantly less. So you are literally
almost stalling on your back foot.
You are stalling all of the time for like a barrel when you don't want to.
Yeah, slowing down.
So I have to surf with my back foot in front of the tail pad, which means in order to create enough speed to get down the line. Which obviously sometimes hinders my ability to do turns.
To pivot off that back foot.
But then I need a board that has that wider tail point, the fin set up. And so it's playing with that. The incredible thing about the wave is you can do that for 2 days, and I've kind of got a really good sense now of the board that I want and the boards that I need in certain conditions. Whereas I think a lot of amputees, we try and surf able-bodied boards, and none of us are able-bodied.
No, I remember Sponge for years would ride an able-bodied surfboard, his Libtech, until someone gave him a knee board, and he just absolutely shredded on it. And he suddenly went, "Why have I not been on this before?" But I think maybe there's an element of a mindset. If you've been able-bodied in surfing before an accident, perhaps to be able to transition to a slightly different board might be hard, might be difficult to make that choice.
There's a real that kind of mental change in a sport that you're familiar with is very difficult. I used to swim and play football and tennis and all sorts of things, and I really don't enjoy that anymore, because my expectation of where I should be is wildly out now. And it's a bit like, I guess, if you were like getting older and you suddenly find that you can't play football very well, you just stop doing it because it's not as fun. And that was the beauty for me with surfing, was that I didn't have that comparison. I didn't have that kind of constant frustration with, oh God, I used to really have a much better bottom turn. Now I'm just like stoked on everything.
It was new.
And it's new.
It was a brand new sport that you started after your accident. And then from every point of every development you're getting better at, there's nothing to compare it from before. I love that. And that's very, very unique about it. We've actually had 5 brand new surfers come today. And we've watched them in the water, and they've all left with a feeling of stoke that we both share when we enter the water. Have you seen in your last 5 years a progressive increase in parasurfers across the country, or do you still feel it's very niche?
No, I feel like there is a progression. I think the progression is by and large within the prone divisions, because although it's much harder for prone athletes to actually get in and out of the water and work on waves, of course, in some ways, like for my division, for example, my surfing prosthesis is £11,500. You do not get a waterproof leg for the NHS. Some people are lucky that they can get legs that kind of work, but because of the length of my leg, I need a private prosthetic, and I had to just save and fundraise and
There's
things.
no funding
Yeah.
for like a sports governing body in that aspect yet.
I mean, I do get grants which help, but there's never a grant for that kind of money. And of course, equipment doesn't, it's like anything, it rusts.
So this prosthesis is built for you to surf, so in a salty environment, and then this wouldn't be a prosthesis you'd then use on the land?
You could do.
Yeah.
But it's got slightly more flex in it, which I feel like helps me on a bottom turn. Certainly to like project back up, I've got a bit more flex. It's a blade. Yeah. It doesn't have the same like equivalent energy return as it would do on concrete on a board, obviously. Yeah. But it's just little things like if you wear your walking prosthesis in salt water, it will degrade so rapidly. People don't want to repair them. You can't send a prosthetic foot back that's not salt waterproof and say, I'm really sorry, it won't last in salt water. You'll have to pay for it again, or the NHS won't provide you with one. Yeah. So within standing categories, you have often the obstacles, which are prosthetics or visual impairment, where you need to pay somebody else to come with you. So it's the standing categories which obviously relate to me, and we still need to push participation in them. But a lot of that comes from the industries that dominate, which prosthetics and areas like that, which are charging lots of money for salt waterproof prosthetics, and hopefully we'll get to a stage again in the NHS where they will provide international athletes, para athletes, the limb equipment that they used to, but now we're not unfortunately.
It's heartbreaking because in theory it's so needed to continue our incredible dominance that we're beginning to see from UK surfers, from yourself, from Melissa, Charlotte. We've had multiple British English titles that have titles, beg your pardon, in the world from English surfers, and Sponge and from Wales. So if there's any prosthetic development out there or any like brand new sort of technological sort of driving that forward, and they're listening to the podcast, we need it now. Let's start sending that kind of development our way. We've got a test pilot right here right now, haven't we?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so you've kind of talked to me about some of the ways in which accessing the ocean for you, there are challenges to get there. Okay, we're going to now look towards your amazing achievement in California, where you headed over. Am I right? 2024 is when you won your world title. How does the process of getting there? Hey, we've got someone coming in, dropping in there.
It's common down here.
Yeah, that's fine. We had a Grom just about to drop in and say hello to us. What I wanted to ask you was, how does the process get from you surfing here in England to being selected for Team England to going out there to taking that title? Run me through the process and then run me what it was like to win that title.
So I was selected pretty quickly for the England team, and actually competed for the first time in the first year that I was surfing. And that was an experience more than anything. You know, I didn't even know what priority was or any. There's such a massive distinction between free surfing and competition surfing as well. Yeah. So I was trying to get my head around that. And then, to be honest, I just came back like absolutely fired up and just thought, right, I'm going to dedicate my life to becoming a surfer that isn't defined by my disability, but the ability to be a great surfer amongst able-bodied surfers. And if you consider that the majority of the year when I'm surfing, I'm not surfing with other amputees. No. So I've got to hold my own in the water. There's no, you know what we're like. If there's a wave, we don't go, oh, go on then, So yeah, I just surf around about 200 times a year consistently. Travelled to different places with point breaks, surf at the wave pool, and put in that work like in the gym and outside, researching, learning about surfing, and I've got myself to a level of competency. So when I went out to Worlds last year, I took Melissa as my coach. She's an absolutely phenomenal coach for competitive surfing, and she's my best mate, so it's a really nice, like, supportive
relationship.
relationship.
For those that
Obviously,
don't, can I explain who Melissa is? For those that don't know out there,
for sure.
so Melissa is 2 times world champion. Am I right? 3 times. Sorry, Melissa, you'll make me regret that. Now, Melissa is visually impaired. She is blind in one eye, and then she has a tunnel vision in the other eye. So, depending on which way she takes off and goes down the line, she's got some vision if she's going in one direction. But I think it's her backhand. She literally has very little vision at all. She has a spotter that helps her and assists her in terms of not catching the waves, but seeing the waves. But she's catching those waves herself, isn't she? And that's Matty from the Isle of Wight that's been her spotter. Am I right?
Yeah.
For a number of years.
Yeah. So Melissa has sort of turned a little bit into coaching at the moment.
Yeah.
So although that she's got this visual impairment, she's also a phenomenal water woman. Her actual ability to know what a wave is going to do is almost next level. So for me, and also just the competition experience, like she was a Paralympian, a 3-time world champion. So for me, that some of the things that I struggle with is that competition mindset, you know, switching between just being a surfer that loves it to suddenly wanting to beat people. And so she's really enabled me to progress in that respect. So we went out last year, and I'd been training for like 3 or 4 months solidly living in Porthtowan, which is pretty heavy. So I kind of need that when I live here where it's a bit softer and gentle. And Huntington was running on a neap tide, so it was pretty high for the whole week, that's better for parasurfers than barreling 6-foot low tide.
Because they get the really good low tide, and then if it's really high tide, there's a shore break on the beach, isn't it? So it's kind of that in-between bit.
Yeah, so we the whole week was pretty much like a pushing tide in typical, like their tidal swings. So it was out the back of the pier, but it was gentle. It's not, you know, like Huntington is a really fast-breaking, pitching wave, which is difficult when your pop-up is slightly hindered.
Yeah.
So last year the conditions were way more favourable, and I just felt in a really nice sort of mindset. I felt really chilled. I was with the team, which was a really, really great environment that we had going on. My first heat, I was a bit manic, which it's just, I was just overwhelmed.
Too frothed.
Yeah, and just catching like utter rubbish, kind of. And I knew I was doing it. As I was paddling, I thought, what are you doing? Like.
And what did Melissa say to you when you came in?
She was pretty cool. She was just sort of like, right, you know, we need to calm down. I'd won the heat. I did what I needed to do. But, you know, just take it down a peg or two. Believe in yourself. Don't, you know, sometimes as a parasurfer, it's hard to get that competition experience. Really hard. There's a lot of our team which will literally surf at the Worlds and then a year later surf there again.
Yeah.
The opportunity.
One comp a year.
Yeah, which is the biggest one.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity for development of that side of your surfing is really limited within parasurfing. And so, yeah, you're almost learning on the job in that respect. By the second heat, I was feeling much better. And by the time we got to the final, the conditions were absolutely just, you know, like when you look at a wave and you go, oh, this is a piece of me. I like this. The left was really working, and I do like my backhand.
So that was peeling into the pier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, I could have surfed all day. It was just fun. And so I went out with that mentality that I was having fun. I was enjoying myself. And I think if you can tap into that, you can surf with freedom as opposed to kind of the anxiety that you can get sometimes from competitions.
You can see that you were just on a tear, and I was following all the socials, and I was just like, yes, when you won. It was amazing. And that feeling is when you get into the rhythm and you get into that zone, you become basically effortless in what you do, but you're still battling with a prosthesis. And for you felt that on top of the world. So when you finished, traditionally in para, do they chair you at the beach in the same way as they do in the WCT? Do they carry you up?
Yeah, they did. I asked not to be chaired because I think it would be quite uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
So we just sort of walked up the beach all together, cheering and stuff. But it's a weird thing, you know, winning, because obviously you want to win. You desperately want to win. And that's what you strive for. And then you've won, and 15 minutes later you're like, right, I need to win next time.
I was going to ask. We're doing this again, aren't we?
Yeah. And it's a different feeling, isn't it? Like the year before I'd come silver, and I kind of loved that because I was like, right, I'm going for gold. And so, yeah, I almost prefer that chasing position. Yeah,
coming from behind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like in terms of a mentality, it's more it's easier to drive forward, wanting to get that gold rather than go, oh my god, I don't want to lose it.
So where are we this year? Are they staying at Huntington? Back to La Jolla? Where are they going to run?
We don't know about the ISA Worlds.
Yeah.
There's a lot of query over it in terms of obviously we didn't make the Paralympics, and so what they'll do we don't know. Could be back at Huntington. It's almost certainly going to be in California because it's cheaper to run it there. But I would imagine we'll get the announcement within this month. It's normally around about May. But there's quite a few para comps. Like there's a world tour for para surfers. It's just unfortunately in Oceanside, Byron Bay, I think Costa Rica and Hawaii.
Yeah.
So for European surfers,
it's a long haul, expensive tour to follow, isn't it?
Just the money is just incredible for those sort of events.
And if we talk about money, we talk about that. Obviously, our able athletes through the progression through England into GB surfing is funded through which Ben Powis, our CEO, talked about the funding kind of process. At the moment, the funding coming into para from Sport England point of view isn't there, is it? And do you feel that is because of what we're currently seeing at the moment is that they've accepted surfing into the Olympics and it has been over the last 2 years, but yet they've still not opened the door to parasurfing into our Paralympics? Why do you think that is? What at the moment is holding that at bay?
It's a really complex question, and I think there are multiple different broad answers that I could give you. Overall, I think the sport's just not quite there yet, and there needs to be improvements in participation within especially the standing divisions. There needs to be improvements within classifications. They are a bit too broad, and for a Paralympic inclusion, the classification is brutal. You know, it's a brutal process and people have to be exactly what they're saying they are. There's the cost and complexity of running a para sport. And this LA 2028 would have only been a demo event. So you'd have talked about 2, maximum 3 divisions, which would have probably been kneeling and below knee stand. So those are the 2 divisions which they because they're cheap, right? Yeah. We just paddle out independently and surf like any other surfer.
Many manpower in terms of all the cover that you're in the water with everything else.
I mean, we kind of assumed that those were the 2 that were going to go ahead. But it's a question really that lies within the roots of the ISA and the classification and those things. People are working really, really hard. We have to hope that Brisbane,
it's got to happen.
Well, we felt like that with LA.
Yeah, of course. Especially for the fact that you've competed in the ISAs in those beaches along that coastline.
Well, that was the reason why they chose it. Yeah.
Exactly. They've already shown they can do the ISA there. They could have run a Paralympic event.
But of course, they're running it at Trestles, which would be a nightmare for a
to try and get you guys down all the way from the road through the kind of like access over the train line.
Just those rocks.
Yeah, and then the cobbles. They are.
Although me and Melissa did scramble down cliffs in Morocco last year when we went for a surf training trip. So
when needs must, you make your way down it as best you can.
One with one leg and one that's blind. We're just hoping for the best.
That is a calamity waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Melissa's obviously getting into a situation now where she's moving towards her coaching. You're still, I can clearly feel, incredibly passionate about competing. If they announced in Brisbane that they were going to run the Paralympics there, you want to represent your country there, don't you?
Yeah.
So you're going to keep going all the way through till then.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that worries me is like protecting my body. It's around about 35% more of a calorie burn for a amputee to do anything. So you do take a bit more of a hit. There's an unnatural position on your hip and for me, what I really need to to create that longevity in my surfing is to really look after my body, and I'm not always so good at that because I'm just like surf.
Yeah.
And so,
Like a grom.
yeah, well, I am like in terms of
yeah.
like in terms of my journey, I'm like proper grommet level.
Yeah.
And so I need to, probably include that at some point within, because this year I've had a couple of like little niggles, and it's probably just over surfing.
I think your monumental rise to your accolade and your achievement is testament to how dedicated with. You talked about how many times you'd surf, 200 times. But sometimes the body's going to tell you when it needs to give itself a little bit of a rest to heal so that you can continue that career.
Yeah.
I'm going to finish off, Zoe, with a question. There's going to be young para children out there, as well as adults as well, like we've seen today, that are thinking about surfing as not an accessible sport for them. Okay, what would you say to them, just to finish off this fantastic episode we've had today?
Yeah, I mean, surfing is probably one of the most accessible sports, because there are, for example, I can't play wheelchair tennis. I love tennis, but I'm not a spinal injury patient, so I can't play that sport. Whereas in surfing, you've got visual impairment, amputees, arms and legs, spinal injuries. You've got it all. So at least at recreational level, you have accessibility across the board. And as a nation, we've really developing our, we've got adaptive coaches coming up. We've got events like the Roadshow, which are introducing people to surfing. We've got the wave pool, which is inclusive and offers adaptive surfers the opportunity to surf. So we're making big steps towards it, and I think if there was anyone that reached out, the opportunity would be there for somebody to learn how to surf. And for any disabled person, life is more challenging often. It brings its unique challenges emotionally and physically. And one of the things that we all love about surfing is that when you get into the water, you can have the worst day ever, can't you? And the therapy of being submerged in an environment that you can't control, that you're just at one with, is a magical experience for able-bodied and disabled people. And I think it's if we can introduce people to an awareness of that and the beauty of being able to surf when you can't walk, it's pretty magical.
Sets you free.
Exactly. Yeah. It's our biggest healer, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. And it, sometimes when you acquire a disability or you've had a disability, having aspirations can often feel a threat because you can't always get to them. You want to do something and everything's against you. But I think with what I've found with surfing is that I've suddenly got those aspirations again. I've suddenly got those benchmarks that I want to get, whether it's to get my turn more vertical. It's those little macro things that you can work towards that give you the thriving passion back in life that I lost when I lost my leg. And I just want to see 1,000 little amputees running around surfing. That's my goal. That's the dream.
I think with an interview like you've just given us today, and if we spread this far and wide, we are going to change the lives of many young people. You're an inspiration. Thank you for being on Off the Lip.
Cheers.
I hope
welcome.
You have a beautiful day down here for this Saturday afternoon in Bournemouth, and I wish you all the best for your future careers.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
I've been running from the wind. I can feel the darkness creeping in.
I'm Martin Reay, and I'm your host of Off the Lip, brought to you by Surfing England, the national governing body of surfing in England. Thank you to the Caravan and Motorhome Club, our headline sponsor, and to Mora Media House for creating these podcasts.